Hi, I'm back. Now I may have lost some of you. Let's see. 23969424396 No, you should be coming back if some of you are here. That would be great if you did. Right now, I'm the only one here. Oh, somebody came back. Hi. Welcome. Sorry that's happening. Whoever's in the room, if you want to share or you want to ask questions or send out some kind of note, you are certainly welcome to. I am just sitting here. So just to say it again, I am sitting in on Kim Buck's Prodependence webinar. Kim asked me if I would take the time to do this because I wrote the book Prodependence, and I figured I could be a reasonable proxy for her. I don't think we'll get kicked off again. I think I resolved that issue. I have a colleague who's using this line. So my name is Dr. Rob Weiss. I wrote Prodependence, and Kim and I are working together on the workbook for Prodependence for partners and for therapists. And what we've been talking about is where this all came from. And I have just seen too many therapists say, oh, well, that spouse just doesn't get it, or that spouse is just so not looking at their own issues, or that spouse isn't focusing on the real problem. And I think actually you guys do a really good job of focusing on the real problem. It's us. When you've got a crazy addict in your life who's doing all this crazy stuff, you're going to go crazy too. Why does that mean a therapist or professional who uses codependency model would turn to you and say, let's look at what's wrong with you? You guys are the ones who are keeping the house running, keeping our lives going, keeping our family life going while we're out there doing crazy stuff like drinking, using, sexing, whatever it is. And then when we finally get to heal and we all get into treatment together, why does someone turn to you as a spouse and say, well, let's talk about what's wrong with you? There isn't anything wrong with you. We are what's wrong with you. We've driven you crazy, literally. And you do need support and help growing beyond the craziness that we have created. Look, if I'm an addict and I'm active in my addiction, I am lying to you. I am manipulating you. I am seducing you. I'm telling you, you tell me this is true and I say it isn't. You say I said this and I say I never said that. Of course, you live with someone, if you're living with an active addict of any kind, who is denying your reality constantly, who is constantly telling you that red is blue and blue is green and green is white, and you're just trying to keep up with the game, and you can't because the person you're living with is telling you that they're being honest when they're lying. And so when you live with someone who says they're being honest and you love that person and they're lying, it will make you crazy too. What I don't understand is why our field has this word for that called codependency, which puts responsibility on you for going crazy because I have lied to you for years and years and years. It seems to me, if you love me and I've lied to you for years and years and years, you would go crazy. And that seems normal because when someone you love lies to you forever, it's painful and makes you crazy. So I will be eager for you guys to ask questions now that we're not going to get cut off. But Prodependence was written by me for a reason. I have been in the field of addiction for 25 years, and what I have seen is what initially might have been a useful way of looking at partners and categorizing and helping family members has become a way to pathologize love. Codependency has become a way to say, oh, well, you're loving too much, you're giving too much, you know what, I don't think anybody can love too much. You may love the wrong person. You may love someone who doesn't love you back. You may love in a way that doesn't meet someone else's needs or yours. You can love someone in a way that's hurtful, or you can love a hurtful person, but don't tell me there's anything wrong with the fact that you give love. Love is a great thing. And if you're a woman or a man who loves too much, I want you to be my friend because I don't believe you can ever love too much. So if your loving is a good thing, if your caring is a good thing, if your commitment to someone despite their challenges is a good thing, then what is it that spouses and partners are going through when those of us who are addicted start to try to finally get ourselves back together? Why are you guys so angry and frustrated? And why does it seem like you're so controlling? And well, it's very obvious to me. If you love someone who's been lying to you and cheating on you and breaking your heart, and you've lost the ability to trust them, and they're the closest person to you, everything would be upside down. I wouldn't know how to proceed the next day because I can't trust what's going to happen in my own home. I think that's enough crazy for the moment without calling somebody codependent. So prodependence, just to say it, is not a label. I would never say to anybody, oh, you're a prodependent. Prodependence is a way of looking at relationships, which kind of says, you know what? I got some vulnerabilities, but you've got some strengths. And where I'm vulnerable, you show up and you give me those strengths. How great is that? And, I see some areas where you're not so strong, but you know what? I can be strong in those areas. In other words, we don't have to be perfect to be in a relationship. We don't have to be fully self-actualized. We don't have to be the best people we can be. We just need to be good enough at enough. We need to be honest and open and be willing to support each other when we know we need support. And you guys should know, but I'll tell you, when do couples have the hardest time? It's when both members of the couple are needful and they're both saying me, 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 and neither one has anything to give to each other for whatever reason. And that's when we struggle the most, So the exchange of needs, I'll give you another example of this. I know when I first started therapy, and I've spent years thinking about this is what I told my therapist, because I wanted a relationship. And I said, well, you know what? And I was like 27. And I said, it's like this. I'm half a pie. And my partner's half a pie, and together we're going to make a pie. And I really want that. And this therapist said to me, under the codependency model, and I bought into this for years and years and years. I used to teach this. I'll have somebody say, oh my God, I lost my mind. Sarah just texted me and I just left the room. Sorry about that. You know what? It would help me if you guys would communicate with me. I know that you don't have a big role here, but if you wouldn't mind, drop me a note, chat me up, ask me a question. That's why we're here. I am lecturing and I'm glad to lecture, but I like better to answer questions. So going back just to the issue of why prodependence, we all have dependency needs of each other. When that therapist said to me, what that therapist said to me back then was this. Now I remember, he said, I don't think, Rob, you have this right. I was 27. He was older. He was a therapist. I believed him. He said, it's more like you're a pie and your partner's a pie and together you're two pies. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I want. That's it. I got it wrong. I'm half a pie. No, I need to become a whole pie and they need to be a whole pie and then we'll be two pies. Of course that makes sense. That's not how relationships work. I'm never going to be fully self-actualized and perfect and completely full and available. When I come to you, I'm going to be needful and have my issues and, do the best I can. And hopefully your issues and my issues will mirror each other or support each other or in some way make us stronger as a couple than we were individually. But coupleship is not about being the best, strongest person you can be before you enter it. I think part of coupleship is looking for strength in the coupleship. And I know I'm stronger in my 18-year marriage than I was ever when I was single. I'm more productive, I'm more creative. So our relationships are worth fighting for. And part of the problem with codependency has been a real emphasis on partners of addicts to detach, to step away, maybe to leave the relationship altogether. And personally, I think a lot of marriages could have been saved back in the 90s and early 2000s had we not had this detachment-based codependency model. Now, I know the people who founded this model. I understand the work they did. I did my PhD dissertation on codependency. I understand where that whole world came from. It isn't the world we live in today. We're not living in a world where we focus on each one of us as individuals being the best we can be. That's part of therapy, and that certainly was the goal in the 1980s when codependency was written about. But our goal today as a healthy person is to be the best person I can be and to be the best person I can be in relationships. To be the best husband, the best partner, the best friend, the best coworker, the best community member, the best, the better my relationships go, the healthier I will be. And in the 80s and 90s, we really more looked at, it was more me generation. It was like, wow, the best I can be, the better I can be, and the better I'll be in a relationship. And that isn't necessarily true. Personal development doesn't necessarily lead to a good relationship. Sometimes it's relationship development that leads to a good relationship. So what I'm fighting back against, this huge tide of codependency, is this idea that somehow we're wrong for loving a troubled person or trying to help them or staying with them, that there's something wrong with us for accommodating their vulnerabilities. I just don't believe that. Love is love is love is love. And if you love a troubled person, good for you. I hope they're able to find their way out of their pain so that you can be out of pain too. But thank you for staying with us, because without you, how would the person get by? Codependency was written during a period when we were very much a Me Too generation. Me, and more me. It was the me generation, So it wasn't Me Too. It was just me, not Me Too, me. The 80s and the 90s and the boomers was about the me generation. And it was all about est and LifeSpring and going to workshops where we could self-actualize and become the best person we could be. But that's really not how we view mental health today. It's part of it. Being the best person I can be is part of it, but having the best relationships I can have is the other part. And what we weren't looking at when codependency was evolved was the meaning and the need for all of us to have close, intimate, functional, deep, enduring relationships. Melody Beatty said, relationships are important, but they cannot be our source. That's what she said in Codependent No More. I don't agree. I think relationships absolutely are our source. They are the well that we dip into when we need, and we're where we pour ourselves out when we have too much. It's into our relationships. You know, the healthiest people, the most unhealthy people, I'm sorry, in our culture, alcoholics, drug addicts, mentally ill people, guess where they are when they're at their sickest? Isolated. And what are we taught in mental health to do with someone who's struggling, who is an alcoholic, a drug addict, or mentally ill? Bring them into community, bring them into connection. Connection is what it's all about. And if you're a Brené Brown fan, as you should be, or a Stan Tatkin fan, or any of those folks who write or talk about attachment and the meaning of connection, Sue Johnson is another person who does that. You'll understand that where the field of psychotherapy, and in my work, I'm hoping to push the field of addiction into, is really being more focused on connection than disconnection. And how can we make the best use of supporting each other in our connections while minimizing the damage that comes when one of us is struggling. Somebody has a question. Thank you. And I hope it's not, I can hear you. So this is a person who said, my partner and I are not happy with the current therapist. He left convinced it's not his responsibility to engage in my recovery. You can't fix her, you have to work on your own selves. She also said to me, like, you're enmeshed and we have to put an end to that. You might as well stay with him because you'd probably marry another addict. Oh. Do you have any suggestions for interviewing new CSAT candidates? Yeah, so here's I would write us. I mean, so I know, since I've been teaching Prodependence, I wrote the book last fall. It came out with a splash. I've had probably 100 therapists write me asking for directions, help. We have a group of about 50 therapists that Kim Buck is running, who are focusing on developing and working on workbooks and therapy guides for therapists to do this work. But in the meantime, write me. I'm at rob@seekingintegrity.com, or write Tammy, which is probably even better, tammy@seekingintegrity.com, and we will refer you to people who follow this model. It just depends on where you live. We are slowly evolving the model. We're slowly getting people to join us. And, codependency was such a huge cultural phenomenon in the 1980s that we're still pushing back against it. By the way, it is the only model that we've ever had. And I'm sad to say that what you just said, what you just quoted, are many of the things that I push back against. Like, well, if you don't fix the problem, you're just going to marry someone else just like this. Like, how is that in any way helpful? Or you have to work on your own selves. Yeah, you do, but you also have to work on the relationship. I mean, I don't know your situation, and I don't want to say, I wasn't in the room with your therapist. I don't know how they handled the situation, but from what you described, that's very much a codependency model. Enmeshment rather than love. Like, oh, you really love this person and you're trying to work this out and you want to understand how they're getting better and you want them involved in your getting better. Well, I mean, if you had heart disease and he had diabetes, you would be involved in each other's care. So why would it be any different in mental health or addiction? It shouldn't be. So write us. We'll be glad to refer. I'll be glad to, if you want to write Tammy your address, you don't have to put it here. We'll send you a copy of Prodependence and you can give it to that therapist. I'm sorry that the world is, at this point, for partners and family members, such a place of blame and shame and responsibility taking, when really what you've just tried to do is love us. And imperfectly, but love us, and in crisis, but love us. And why can't we just thank you for that? And I want to tell you this, and this is my stuff, but it's not easy to get an idea across in 2019. Our media and our world is so dominated by just a couple of issues. And despite all the channels we have for information, there's not much being shared about anything but politics. And while, just a few years ago, Brené Brown could do a TED Talk and tens of thousands of people would find it, or, not that long ago, John Bradshaw could write a book and millions of people would read it, our world is not like that today. And getting new ideas out when there are established ones already in place is very difficult. So I am working very hard to push this out, not because I'm going to get a whole bunch of dollars for working on Prodependence, because I deeply believe that all of us who love people who are troubled deserve to be celebrated and encouraged and nurtured, in our attempts to, I mean, look, if you're willing to stay with somebody who's caused you pain, if you're willing to stay with someone who's trying to do better but hasn't yet, you're my hero. So to call someone like that enmeshed, to me, is to go against nature, because our nature is to love, and our nature is to love the people we love. And our nature is when they fail, to step in and try to help them. And then even if we get crazy in the process, of course we get crazy in the process. If my wife had cancer, I go crazy too, you know? So I really resent this whole idea that if you get deeply involved emotionally with a troubled person, there's something wrong with you, unless their trouble is cancer or diabetes or heart disease, in which case you can get as involved as you want and give up as much of your life as you want because it's a physical illness. That's bullshit. Illness is illness. Addiction, mental illness, your love is no different for me, I hope, if I have diabetes or I'm an alcoholic. And your desire to have me well is no different and available to you and back in the relationship we might have had 10 years ago. You're going to want all of that, whether I have cancer or I have an alcoholic. So why do people get blamed for loving someone who's addicted and shamed and devalued and told, well, if you don't fix this, you're just going to do another mistake like this person, when if I had cancer, you wouldn't say that to me? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And so, yes, I will support you absolutely in trying to find you the help that you need. We've got some other questions. Do you have, there was another part of this question. Do you have suggestions for interviewing new therapists? Yeah, I think it's really important to simply say, I don't like the codependency model. I'm not willing to be treated under that model. I'm looking for something more attachment-based. Anybody in the sex addiction field is going to know my name. So, you know, Rob Weiss's Prodependence model is really what I want to follow. Is that something that you can do and work with me? And if they say, I don't know anything about that, or I don't think I can do that, or what do you mean you don't like codependent? You know, by the way, you have to understand, partners, therapists are programmed to blame you for not buying into this model. The very fact that you may push back against it is seen as something wrong with you. It is an impossible situation, codependency, because no matter what you do, there's something wrong with you. You know, if you move too close, that's not okay. If you distance too much, that's not okay. If you gave a lot, that wasn't okay, even though they needed it. It's crazy making. And by the way, codependency was evolved in a period where the world was such that people got 40 or 60 therapy sessions a year if they had good insurance. Well, now you're lucky if you get 4. So why would I ever want to send someone down a rabbit hole of self-doubt and self-examination when it really isn't going to make a whole bunch of difference in their world? But if I validate what they've been doing, if I support what they've been doing, if I ask them what parts of it they think have been productive and what parts haven't, rather than making parts right or wrong, why don't we just look at how have you been able to help this person get better and how the ways you've tried to help not worked? All that says is every attempt you've made to help has come from the right place, but some things work and some things don't. That's neutral. I can buy into that. But that there's something deeply wrong with you for staying with me, for loving me, for trying to help me, I just think that makes you a good person. And I'm not going to let anybody call you a bad name for that. At least I'm trying. Someone else said, I appreciate your understanding of wanting to stay with an addicted spouse. But sometimes I don't hear enough about how a spouse shouldn't stay when it becomes too damaging, when it goes too far. Well, I think there's some pretty actually obvious answers to that, and I'll give you that. First of all, physical violence is never okay. So if you've got somebody who's hitting you or you're hitting them, not okay. You should not be with that person. If that person is actively harming you, like you need the money in the bank for lunch money for the kids and they took the money for drugs and you don't have lunch money for the kids, if you're at risk, if your kids are at risk for physical violence, for neglect, profound neglect, for some kind of abuse, then that's not a good situation to be in. It may not mean you can't work it out with that person over time, but sometimes, very frequently, addicts will think they still have control. Addicts will, the whole thing about detachment from codependency really is simply about this. Addicts are just as fearful of abandonment as everyone else. The idea that you might leave me can really motivate me to get into treatment in ways that I might not have been willing to do otherwise. And interventions often carry with them the threat of abandonment. And I don't know if that's really the best way to intervene on someone, but that's sort of the model. So, what the model kind of does, though, is it kind of uses spouses and partners and family members as pawns to get the person sober by pulling their love away or giving their love. And how about you just love the addict all the time? Whether you need to leave them or not, whether you need to live away from them or not, you could just send them love all the time. And stay out of the way of the abuse. But no one needs to be hit. No one needs to be verbally abused. No one needs to be told to be lied to consistently. When you are in pain and the relationship is such that it's causing constant pain, you need to get away from the pain and the cause of it. Not because you're part of the problem or contributing to the problem, but because who wants to sit around for a whole bunch of pain? So that's what I would look for in terms of when it might be time to distance. Is there abuse going on? Are there things my kids are seeing or that the family members are seeing that I don't want them to see? Is my partner unable to control themselves, or am I unable to control myself, my anger, my frustration, my fear, whatever that is, and kids are seeing this and experiencing this tension all the time? Yeah, it's probably better for kids to not be around that tension all the time. So, I think but again, I think this has to do with how escalated the problem is. In a very escalated problem where that person is not changing their behavior, not working on themselves, is abusive and difficult and not moving forward, I'm not sure I want to stay in a situation where I can be abused with someone who's not moving forward. But if I'm living with someone who's really trying and has made an investment in getting better, I'm going to hang in there knowing that they might hurt me sometimes, and hopefully they don't mean it, but I'm also going to have a lot more support for myself, because now I understand that living with an addict means I can't trust them, I can't depend on them, I can't rely on them, I can't turn to them to get my needs met. But I do need people I can trust, I can rely on, and I can turn to when I get my needs met. And so, part of being a spouse of an addict or a mentally ill person is learning that you need a lot more support, and that we're not always the best people for you to turn to when you need and desire to feel better, because we may not have it to give. But that doesn't mean you need to wander around not getting it. You need to put in some very secure support systems for yourself so that your needs do get met while I'm struggling to recover. That's sort of what that part's about. Let's see if we got more questions. I do. Oh, I get it, but are you saying Pia Melody, not Melody Beatty isn't applicable today? She treated disease codependency that I had from childhood. So here's what I will say to you. I think what Pia Melody did in the late 80s was really useful, but I wouldn't call it codependency. She did. She joined the codependency bandwagon, but you have to understand, and again, my dissertation was written on this, so I know a lot about codependency. There are 440 books with the word codependency in the title. There has never been a diagnosis formalized in any way for codependency. There is no medical issue called codependency. There is no insurance place where you can, it doesn't exist. It's a pop culture idea. Now, some people, by buying into that idea, have learned and grown and gotten a lot out of it, and I think that's fantastic. Whatever method you choose to find your healing, good for you. But I believe that you can find healing without shaming yourself for the love that you've given, without blaming yourself for the way that you gave it, and being much more compassionate for yourself. I think you can be better to yourself without giving yourself a nasty label, like codependency, which is a label, like it or not. And it's okay if you want to give yourself a label, but maybe you should give yourself a label that actually exists, because in mental health, codependency doesn't exist. It is a pop culture phenomenon that came around in the 1980s. Read the book. I write a lot about it. So Pia's work, just to say it, was an attempt to correct a lot of the early assumptions that were made in the codependency model. She liked some of what she saw, but not all of it. And I think Pia did a reasonably good job of trying to turn that model into something that is more functional and helpful for someone like you. But you can't call it codependency. Pia did, but she was wrong. Because codependency is a particular model that was written in a particular time by 2 or 3 particular people, and they codified it, they identified it. I can tell you what codependency is. And what Pia does is like codependency light. And the reason I wrote Prodependence was to say, hey, if you're not going to call what you're doing codependence, if it isn't based on a profound trauma model, which is what codependency is based on, then what do you call the work you do with partners? Because all we have is codependency, and we can't just have one model for treating this huge population like anyone who's ever loved a troubled person. We have one model. I decided maybe we needed another one a little bit more loving and a little bit more compassionate. And I will say something else to you, the person who wrote me that. You know what? I really admire you for wanting to get on the bandwagon and grow and heal and be more boundaried and have more a better sense of yourself and have healthier relationships and all of those things. I just think, number one, there are lots of ways to work on that without having to call yourself codependent. And number two, you have to understand that not everybody who loves an addict wants to grow. Not everyone who loves an addict wants to enter 5 years of therapy and read 300 books so that they can, that may not be the path that everyone can afford to take. Not everyone has the time, the money, the resources, or the interest in self-examination. And why is it that we label everyone who's involved with an addict as a codependent and force them immediately into their own treatment for their own issues? How about the issues they're dealing with just living with a crazy person? Why don't we start there? And by the way, I want to say something else to you. Codependency was right in that we do show our early trauma when we are in the crisis with an addict. But we're not doing it to maintain the addiction, enable the addiction, rescue the addiction. We are showing our trauma issues because when you are in a crisis, you're going to regress. Any human being, when they're in a crisis, we regress. When you have a young child who's in a crisis, they might start wetting their bed again because children regress. Adults, when we have a crisis, we might act more like we did as traumatized children. And so will you see kind of what someone's trauma looked like or what it might look like when they're at the end of their rope of living with an addict? Yes. Is that the time to work on their trauma? No, it's not. Because you have to work on the trauma that's being created just by living with an addict. Just deal with the crisis that's going on right now, is what I say. And then later on, if somebody chooses and wants to do self-examination, self-exploration, then there are a whole variety of ways they can engage in that using their relationship as a model. But I still would never call their love wrong. I would never call the way they loved wrong. Maybe not effective, but not wrong. And I certainly wouldn't blame them for their loving. Yeah. Others. Can you talk about how an addict can overcome shame to actively engage in discussing his or her past with a spouse for the betterment of the future? Sure. I mean, I'm not sure about the how part because that's individual. I think addicts in recovery, if they're doing a good job, will quickly get to a place, hopefully, of willingness to be honest, willingness to be open, willingness to put it all on the table. But it doesn't always mean we have the ability to talk about it right away, especially to you, because if you're the person we hurt the most, you're the person we're probably going to feel the most shame around. So, it may be useful in the beginning to talk about shameful issues with a therapist present, because like if you talk to me about something shameful, I might collapse into, oh my God, I'm such a piece of shit and I hate myself. And then the therapist is going to say, well, why'd you bring that up with him? He just ended up collapsing into his narcissism. And do it in therapy. Talk about these issues and find a way to negotiate these issues in therapy so that if someone starts to get really deeply shamed or embarrassed, you can stop, you can clarify, you can move back in. The problem with, so there may be, there's a couple of issues. I mean, addicts don't want to talk about we don't want to talk about our behavior, because we don't want to reveal anything you don't know. We don't want you to be angrier at us. We don't want to see that angry face. We'd rather all this went away. Thank you very much. So, part of the shame is having to look you in the eye and see you cry or see you hurting or see you anxious and realize that I caused that. And then I got to look at my kids and realize that they're not in the best shape either, probably because I didn't support their mom or whoever their other parent was. And that means I wasn't the best dad. And these are hard things to look at. So, maybe one issue at a time around shame, maybe one moment at a time, maybe doing it in therapy. And there is a difference between my being unwilling to talk about it with you because I'm still keeping secrets, I'm still hiding things, I'm still trying to manipulate, or I just feel so awful about myself that I can't get into it with you. But you know what? Here's my thought. I think addicts have some responsibility to push themselves a little bit. You know what? I'm ashamed, I'm embarrassed, I feel awful, but as long as you don't yell at me tonight, I'm glad to talk to you about that. I know you might want to yell at me, but that would cause me to shut down. How can we talk about this in a way where I can stay open and I can hear what you have to say? That is the goal of the work. So you do need to get there. Someone asked, I'm an addict. I don't partner with addicts. I'm the problem. I didn't go to handle someone else. I need help from me. Well, good for you. I hope you got your help. I'm not saying that people who go to codependency meetings and go to CODA and follow that method are wasting their time. I admire anybody who's been willing to take any particular path and say, this works for me, and I'm going to become a better person and work on myself on this path. Good for you. I also have seen in the world of being an addiction therapist for 25 years that the codependency model, more often than not, leaves spouses and partners feeling alienated, blamed, shamed, responsible, and like there's something deeply wrong with them for having loved a troubled person. And I just don't believe that that's true. And I think it's incredibly unfair to take the person who's really been taking the brunt of the difficulty with the addict and making part of it their fault. So I'm not sure what your addiction is. I will tell you this, though, and you can be with me or not on this. I don't think that any of us can ever be addicted to a person. And that is my big problem with codependency. It basically says you get addicted to people. We don't get addicted to people. You can love people, hate people, be with them, not be with them, but you don't get addicted to a person. You can get addicted to certain experiences that you can have, and you can repeat those experiences with certain people, but that still means you're addicted to an experience, a behavior, a set of circumstances, not a person. And I really do believe that codependency made the wrong turn when they moved from saying you're addicted or obsessed with the person's drinking, the person's using, the person's illness. I get being obsessed with someone's illness. I don't get that there's something wrong with me for loving them. I'll give you an example of this. I did a prodependency training in Chicago not that long ago. I love this metaphor. And I had a therapist who was there at the training, and he was probably in his early 30s as a social worker, and he had a big book bag on his shoulder. And when he came to meet me, I was signing books after the talk on prodependence. He said, you know what? I think I get this thing that I've never gotten before. He said, I never felt comfortable with codependency, but it was all the language I had. And he said, now I think I get it. He said, let me tell you if this is right. This young man said to me, you see this book bag on my shoulder? He said, it's full of books about cancer. And I have been doing nothing but reading about cancer online every night, cancer specialists, cancer information, cancer shows, cancer TED Talks. He said, you know why? Because my dad has cancer. And I love my dad. And I realized, like, maybe I can learn more, maybe I can. And so I've done everything I can. And he said, in this book bag that I'm carrying with books about cancer, this isn't any different than the spouse who walks in and her husband's an alcoholic and she's got all the books on alcoholism. This is the same fear of loss, natural, the same hope that things won't get worse, the same desire to fix someone I love because I love them and I care about them, which is a healthy thing. Now, if you love people who are troubled and you try to fix them and they're unfixable, that's not really good for you, but I still wouldn't call it codependency. Let's see, what do we got down here? What rights do adult children with a sex addict father have in terms of asking for confirmation of their dad's attendance in therapy groups, etc.? They don't want to see him unless he's getting help. What is the best way for them to ask or get proof? Also, is there any help for adult children of sex addicts? There are no groups for adult children of sex addicts that I know about, but there's a lot of discussion about it. And interestingly, I mean, if I had enough of those folks, I might start a drop-in group like this one for you guys. So write Tammy if you really feel that there should be a drop-in group for children and family of non-spouse of sex addicts, and maybe we'll get a group started. As far as what rights you have, you know, I don't know why you're asking that question. So let me be clear. If you are someone who has 2 kids and they're 14 and 16 or 13 and 12, and you found out that your dad is a sex addict, you've been looking at porn and acting out, I might feel uncomfortable with my dad hanging out solo around my teenagers, not because necessarily he's going to do something with them, but just I feel this sense of ick and I'm not comfortable with it and we can't talk about it. And, you know, so it might well be that, Dad, you know, I'm glad to go out for coffee with you, spend time with you. We can, you know, I'm glad to support you. But if you want to be around the kids and in our family life, I need to know that you're in recovery. And let me tell you what I need from you. I'd like an invoice once a month that shows that you've been in therapy. If you could tell me what 12 steps meetings you've been to, I will accept your saying that you have been there. But if I can't accept it, I might ask you to have a sign-in sheet. You know, it really just depends on, I mean, the question is, what do you want from this? You want proof that your dad is really working on this. I can tell you he can be going to meetings in therapy and not really working on it. So the real proof will be in how is he treating you? How is he talking about this? How open is he? How is he treating his grandkids or his own kids? Or, you know, is he willing to be open within reason? Is he willing to take responsibility? Is he willing to be more honest? I mean, I'm looking for clues toward change rather than proof that this person has been to therapy. Because believe me, I know plenty of people go to therapy and 12-step meetings and they're not getting any better. So because they're not ready, or they don't want to, or they're just doing it for the wrong reasons. So I don't think that attendance is necessarily, it's proof for the court that someone has done something. I don't know if it's proof for a family relationship. The proof that I would want to see is in how are they acting? How are they treating me? How is this person treating my mother or my dad or whatever that is? You know, am I seeing overall improvement and healing in the process? That would tell me a lot more than, you know, anything that actually said where they'd been or not been. Okay, well, that is all the questions for now. And so I will wait for some more. This is hard stuff, guys, because codependency in itself is a difficult topic that's kind of hard to understand, I think. And then here I am saying, you know, I don't think codependency is really the answer. You got to try this way. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I was just learning about that. And now I'm looking at this, and, you know, I can't tell you what's right for you. But I will tell you that I wrote the book for a reason. You know, I wrote Prodependence because I have a mentally ill mom. And when in the 1990s, when codependency was all the rage in both mental health and addiction, my mom was deeply psychotic and ill, and she showed up at my house at 3 in the morning in the pouring rain in California, and my mom lived in Florida. So there I was at 3 in the morning, I answered the door, and my mom was stark raving psychotic in the rain at 3 in the morning. And I let her in, and I gave her a cup of coffee, and I gave her a shower, and I warmed her up, and I helped her to sleep. And that morning, when we got up the next morning, I took her to the hospital for treatment. But when I went to my meeting for families of my support group for the families of mentally ill people, they were thoroughly flushed with that codependency model. And they said, well, you need to detach. Your mom just needs to figure out how to take better care of herself. And you can't be rescuing her like that. And, you know, maybe she just needs to sit out there in the rain and she'll learn her lesson. And that was the language of codependency. And at the time, and I got to tell you, it's in the book, I'll tell you now, there was no way that I was ever going to let my mother sit on the rain. There's no way I would ever let my child just go homeless because they won't stop using. I will never let go of the people I love. I will always try to hang in there and help them. What codependency did in the mental health field is it made a lot of people homeless. Codependency is not even mentioned in the mental health field. It's not used, it's not talked about, and none of the languages, if you look at like AMI and NAMI and online mental health groups, they don't talk about detachment or separation or looking at yourself. They talk about the relationship between you and that mentally ill person. Because they know, in the mental health field well knows, that if you take somebody, a family member, and tell them, oh, you don't have to be responsible for that mentally ill person, they need to do it themselves. If that person can't do it themselves, they end up homeless. So mental illness no longer looks at this. In fact, the only field where we hold any value in this word codependency at all is the addiction field. And that doesn't make any sense because the model doesn't work in any other part of mental health or physical health. Why would it work here? It doesn't. And if it's worked for you, good for you. I would say, I'm sorry that you had to bend yourself into a model that left you feeling like you had done something wrong for loving someone or the way you loved them. Because I don't think you can ever love somebody too much. But you can love them in ways that are unhealthy. Let's see if we have any more questions. No. So guys, we have about 10 minutes left. I will tell you that Prodependence has really become a big deal, and we are evolving clinicians and clinics and programs all over the country so that people can provide it. All I'm asking for is for a partner or all I'm asking for is for a parent of a kid who's an addict to not have to feel like it's their fault that that kid is drinking or using, because it isn't. No parent is responsible for their kid drinking or using. You're not responsible for me sexing or drinking or any of it. If I choose to do that, it doesn't matter how much you nag me or whine at me or whatever codependency says you're doing, it's still my choice, right? So this whole fear in codependency that somehow you're going to do something that's going to make me use or me sexually act out is inappropriate. It's poorly placed. It is always the addict's 100% responsibility if they want to choose to act out. And whether you have sex with me or don't, or love me or don't, or it's still my choice. I can never responsibly say, because you did that to me, I'm going to go use. That is just an empty threat. Because you can do whatever you want to me. You can divorce me, nag me, not have sex with me, whatever you want to do, and I can just go get a hobby or get a divorce or go into marriage counseling or do a whole bunch of other things other than say, okay, you treated me this way, so now I'm going to go act out on my addiction. That's called an excuse. And sadly, codependency for addicts for many years has become to be an excuse for an addict to say, oh, well, why wouldn't I go back to drinking? After all, the way she nags with her codependency and her unwillingness to look at her part, it doesn't matter whether you look at your part or not. I am still responsible for my recovery and my stopping using and acting out. You know, you can do what you're going to do. Hopefully you're going to get the nurturing and support and the love that you need as a partner for having lived with a crazy person, an addict, which can make anybody kind of crazy. But you're not going to get blamed or shamed for that. So I think we got a new question up here. And that is, are you getting any pushback on the Prodependence model? No. And no. That was my greatest fear. And I'm friends with Pia Melody and you know, Claudia Black and some of those people. And I have to say that in fact, the note that someone put up here, I'm not sure if it was you or someone else, about, well, I recovered with codependency and it helped me heal. And someone else once after a talk saying, you know, I don't want anyone down talking codependency because it was helpful to me. I think I've had two people say that to me. And my response is always, hey, whatever you found to help you, good for you. It didn't work for me, but it might work for you. And it's also nice to have more than one choice about healing than simply codependency. So great. I brought another choice for therapists to consider. I brought a new way for us to look at ourselves. That may work for you and that may not. But honestly, I really, really being sincere with you. I've taught Prodependence now maybe 7 or 8 times at national conferences with a few hundred therapists. They are in tears. Every therapist to a one says to me, I've been thinking about this for 10 years, and you finally, me, put words in Prodependence to what I've been thinking about. Therapists are saying to me all over the country, I don't like codependency, it never worked for me. I don't, you know, it might have been great in the 80s, but I'm doing something different now. And when I ask them what they're doing, they say, well, my own version. But you can't do your own version of a model that was created in the 80s. You either do that model or you don't. So that's why I have come up with something new. Universally, and I really mean this, I've gotten almost nothing but gratitude, appreciation. I didn't expect it. I thought all the code people would hot on my tail. Hasn't happened. It just hasn't happened. In fact, I've seen more tearful people say, thank God. I've been blaming myself for years for X, Y, and Z, and finally you give me a chance to be off the hook a little bit because my son died on the street and they told me not to help him, and now I'll never forgive myself. Thank you for helping me understand that that wasn't the right direction for me. You know, mostly I get people who are grateful for hearing a different way. That's just the truth. And that's why I'm continuing to pursue, because people are responding and saying, I think we should do the work that way. I've been looking for a new way to do the work. I like that way of doing it. And it fits into how we view mental health and recovery today. At the time codependency was written in the 1980s, 35 years ago, we were almost entirely focused on trauma and trauma repetition as being our focus of treatment and healing. But that's not what we look at primarily today. Trauma is important, but so is attachment. The primary thing that has changed since Melody Beatty and Claudia and even Pia and all those folks who are writing in the late 80s is our focus in mental health has shifted from an individual being their best and absolute self to our best self being defined not only by our own achievements, but our ability to maintain and grow healthy relationships. Our ability to connect, our ability to give and receive, our ability to care give for those who need it. That is actually, those things today are seen as strengths. So we've moved past, as a mental health and addiction culture, the model of codependency was very helpful for very many people in very many ways, but we really don't look at mental health in the same way as we did when that model was evolved. And it is time for us to move on. And I really believe that people can heal without blaming and shaming themselves for the love they've given. And I think you can learn lessons about how to love differently without being told that you're broken or an addict or there's something wrong with you for the people you've loved or the way you've loved them. Now, if you were loving someone and you were also drinking like a fish or had your own addictions going on, well, yeah, I hope that that codependency process pushed you into your own recovery. Good for you. But if you simply have loved an addict and you're in pain because you're not getting love back and you're giving and giving and giving and ending up giving more than you're getting back and just hurting, and then you're feeling resentful, you know, that's just the normal, healthy sense of what happens when someone loves you, fails you. And I'm not going to blame anyone for that. We got more questions. There's only 4 of you, so you're quite active. I appreciate that. I agree with everything you've said. Thank you. I went to the Meadows and Pia to learn esteem, blah, 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 blah. I learned how to be me. Yes, good. No, that's great work. Pia does great work. Okay. Codependency has no definitive meaning. It does not. I don't attach to loving an addict. No, you don't. You attach to a person that you love, and they may or may not have a problem, but that's not your fault. I blame my addictions on covering up my immaturity. Yeah, stick to relationship healing. It is the best way to do it. Do you ever do live presentations for Present Tell, or all your appearances closed conferences? Oh, I do live appearances all the time at family. There are conferences for like improving families. There are Christian conferences or Jewish conferences or all kinds of seminars and workshops that I do for non-professionals. Just invite me. And let me be really clear with you guys before I stop tonight about my intention for Prodependence. I intend for there to be fully an accepted alternative model to codependency for every partner who walks into treatment. So that in America, when you are the partner of any addict, you don't only have the model of self-blame, self-examination, and having to detach. I think there are other ways that we can heal. I'm not saying that codependency may not be helpful for many people, but I also know it's not helpful for many people, and those people need something else. Folks, it's been an honor to be with you. I'm going to probably duck out at this point and leave you. If you just know that, if you want to hear more about this, by the way, I do have a podcast. Kim may not mention that, but it's called Sex, Love, and Addiction. And we have about 40 podcasts with experts from all over the country talking about addiction, mental health, sex, love, and addiction. It's free. Dr. Rob Weiss, I do that. And also, on sex and relationship healing, we have all kinds of drop-in groups for you guys. And we also just opened treatment. So know that here in LA, I am actually conducting and running here in this office. We're doing 2-week programs for sex addiction, and we're managing the residents as well. So I feel like we have the whole thing, both the treatment and where you're staying, where the guys are staying. And I am doing treatment for men who have intimacy disorders like sex addiction and also chemsex, meth sex, coke sex, drugs, and sex. I think that we have not done the best job of addiction treatment in our country. We tend to lump people together and say, oh, well, they all do this drug, so help them all together. It doesn't always work that way. There are certain people, especially if you have an intimacy disorder, a sexual problem, an attachment problem, a trauma problem, it's going to require a slightly different treatment than just your average treatment center. And for men and women who are sexually acting out as an addiction or whose sexual and intimate behavior has paired with their drug or alcohol use, you need special treatment. And that's what we're doing here at Seeking Integrity. And if you're interested in that work, you can find us at seekingintegrity.com. I think there's one more question, and for the sake of answering it, I will. I don't need a new name for my recovery. Good for you. You are right. I don't qualify for Prodependence. Okay. I applaud you for what you're doing. I get it. Thank you so much. I am not trying to in any way minimize people's healing. What I'm trying to do is have a more loving, nurturing, and I think, accurate response to those of us who've given sometimes years to trying to help someone we love who's failing. I think we deserve the grace and the love and the appreciation for what we've given, no matter how we gave it, healthy or otherwise. Being willing to love and stand by and help someone who's troubled, I don't see anything. I can only call that being a hero. And but sometimes being a hero is going to end up with you being pretty beat up, and that's why we're here to help. Prodependence.com is the site. Kim Buck will be back in 2 weeks. And if you want to write me, I'm Rob at seekingintegrity.com. It has been a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. I will also be, if you want to talk about sex addiction, on In the Rooms, intherooms.com. I'm there at 6 o'clock tonight. I'll be leaving here, running home, and getting on In the Rooms to do an hour of Q&A for sex addicts and their partners. Thank you for the opportunity. Please join us again. Talk to you later. Bye for now.